looks like we have Mick Douglas and Mick Douglas, at least on my screen. No, I'm kidding.
Where?
Hey, you got me, and then also my co-presenter Sebastian, the guy who actually did this code base. So I had to share my link. That's why he's listed as Mick Douglas.
So Mick Douglas, he and I have known each other for many years. He is one of my mentors in the InfoSec space and has forgotten more about PowerShell than I will ever learn. If any of you are on the software development or the Windows side of things, I should say, not software development, but on the Windows side of things and work in PowerShell, you ought to look into some of the research that he's done. It's freaking amazing. But honestly, one of my favorite stories was at a conference that is now defunct called Nauticon, where it's ostensibly a security conference, but it's like the fringes. Like, for instance, I gave a talk on game design, and my son and I played a miniatures game that he and I built when he was 7, and described how we built it and how it was accessible for young children. Mick gave a talk on how to use the I just forgot what it's called. The Xbox
The Kinect.
The Kinect, thank you, yes. To visualize security data. And it was about the coolest freaking thing I'd seen up to that point. He's standing up there waving his hands around and this cube of data is moving around and he can zoom into things, and holy cow, that was something else. So when you talk about building software, I think we're in good hands here. But I'll let you two go ahead and introduce yourselves and talk about the tool that you guys are working on.
Bill, thanks for all the kind words. Believe me when I say that you have mentored me far more. Like, I feel like I owe you, not the other way around. Let's talk a little bit about Fantastic, this project that Sebastian and I have been working on for well over a year at this point. And so I want to just start diving in on why we did this and give you some teases on what this is. Now, before we get any further, I do want to point out that this is publicly available out on our repo. You can go download it. I'm actually going to be demoing the code that is currently public out there. And Sebastian's been very sporting and has pushed updates just up to now. So we're tempting the demo gods very heavily at this point. So if things break, that's expected. So before we dive in, I want to go over to our machine here, and I'm going to actually show you how to go about doing the install of this. So there we go. Let's do, I'm going to make a new directory, make dir Wild West Hacking Fest Roundup. Okay, and so then you just simply cd into Wild West Hacking Fest Roundup like so. And then the way you do the install for Fantastic, it's really dead easy. And man, Sebastian made this easy for everyone. Hopefully when the pandemic lifts, he's going to get to go to the hackathons, and folks, drinks are on him, because watch how easy this project is to install. You do npx fantastic -CLI init, like that. And then what's going to start happening is it's pulling stuff for you, and then it asks what kind of mode you're going to be in. For the sake of, I already am tempting the demo gods enough, we're just going to do the default off and not do the AD integrations that Fantastic supports. It does support that. You'll understand why we have that in just a little bit. So let's do the default off. And now what's going to happen is over the next, I don't know, about 3 or 4 minutes, the NPM package manager is going to be downloading a whole bunch of node components. They're going to compile. Honestly, it's kind of boring. What I wanted to show you is just how easy this is to set up, though. It's literally this easy. So I want to go back and switch to my, now we have to set up our admin account username. I have a friend of mine. Hey, if you're watching, Abdul, I always call him out now. Abdul Aziz is his name. And so I'm going to give him his password. Confirm the password. Okay, now Fantastic's installed. I didn't even get a chance to swap back to the presentation. It installed that fast. I hate to sound like an infomercial person, but kind of do, because it really is that easy. So let's go back now.
So one thing to note is that you have to have npm installed first. That's the one.
Yeah, exactly. There are a couple dependencies that you need for those commands to work. Number one, you need the git CLI utility so that you can pull down components that are needed. You also need Node.js for Windows. At present, Fantastic is built for Windows from the ground up. There are plans eventually to make it be platform agnostic, but we're not there yet. Even though we've been developing this tool for about a year, it is very, very, it's robust in certain areas, and then there's others where it's not as robust. But once you've got those two things done, seriously, that's it. You just do that command that I typed, the npx Fantastic CLI in it, and you wait a few moments, answer a couple questions, and you're done. So that's it. So let's start diving in. Little intro. Sebastian, tell us about yourself.
So yeah, I'm currently working with Mick at InfoSec Innovations and developing Fantastic. I'm also a musician in my spare time. I play in a couple of rock bands. My original background is more in game development, and so I started out working a lot with Unity, and then I kind of oriented myself more into the web domain because I find that web games are quite an interesting platform. And well, then Mick saw a web game that I made, and he liked it, and he asked me if I wanted to make Fantastic, and here we are.
Yeah, it was actually one of the stranger calls. I said, hey, I like the code that you did. Because me being me, I looked at the front-end code that I could see, and I was like, wow, this is actually really tight and clean. And it turns out that Sebastian's game development background really was a big win. We were talking about this a couple weeks ago, I believe. Just some of the problems that we had to overcome in building this was just really weird. Before we dive into that stuff, I just want a little bit about me. I run InfoSec Innovations. I founded it. We're doing really crazy cool research. Fantastic is just one of the projects that we're doing. Check us out. We love what we do. In my spare time, I teach for SANS. I'm also a member of the INS faculty, and you can see me on Twitter at BetterSafetyNet. What we're going to cover in the time that we have allocated here is, folks, that's ridiculous. Why would somebody be expected to learn those sorts of things? That's just way too high of a cost of entry. So here's the other good truth. Even though you've got lots of good resources like TechNet, conferences like this, which are lovely. By the way, thanks again for the invite.
Okay, yeah. So this is sort of where I come in with my game developer background. Mick started explaining the kind of ideas behind Fantastic, and he was like, what would be really cool is if we could have something a bit like quests and games that guide you through the process. And so you can see Mick's just starting up the server here. And so we're making a system that will guide the user through using our program. So not only does our program provide a kind of interface layer over a lot of PowerShell commands, but it'll also actually guide you, and it'll suggest actions to perform and how to perform them, and stuff like that. So if you want to go ahead and show us the interface.
What you're looking at here is in the Fantastic interface, you can find the forgotten systems that are being neglected. You can do daily quests to find machines that need a little nudge in one direction or another. Sebastian made this really cool thing using JS Plum that allows you to click a particular quest, and then you can just run this, and on the back end, it runs some PowerShell to tell you if the firewall is running. Do you have Windows Defender up and running as we would expect? Cool, that's running. Okay, do we have this patch enabled? Okay, start. Oh no, we see that it's missing this particular hotfix. So what you can do now is, at least not right now, eventually we're going to make it so that you can click this and fix it, then fantastic. But you can actually go in and adjust this machine. And so the advantage of this is that there's a very clean, easy to follow UI that people can go through to handle things.
The thing which we're going to go into detail a bit more about later is that what we're calling the user scripts. The kind of base unit is an action. It's something that you can execute on a host or on an assortment of hosts, and then we have what we're currently calling tests and quests, which are a kind of wrapper around these actions. And you can see we've come up with a way here of combining these items into more of a meaningful story, where you have to run the first node of the story, which is going to run an action and then check some things about that action, and then if the conditions are met, it will allow you to move on to the next node in the story. So that's pretty much what we've been working on, and obviously in the future we'll have more of these story quests with more items in them.
So one thread that I'd like to tug on that Sebastian mentioned is that this is a wrapper for the different actions. So if I'm working on a particular machine, I can check OS patches and see what's going on. A lot of these are fairly similar to, is Sysmon running on this one? Okay, Sysmon's not. It allows you to very quickly and discreetly look for particular configuration settings or things that you want to have running in your environment. So it's a very nice mediated experience. With that, I want to go back to this, okay? The admin issues. There's a lot that's problematic when it comes to admin things. The usability for technologists is actually quite poor. I think that a lot of the user experience for regular day-to-day users is actually quite good. But if you think even within the CLI, knowing which arguments and attributes need to be included on a particular command is very tricky. Most people wind up having to build these rather complex cheat sheets. And so what we're doing with Fantastic, we're not hiding those complexities. In the next demo, we'll make it very easy for you to see what we're doing for you. What we're doing, though, is we're trying to make it a lot easier. We're trying to smooth that difficulty curve. So there's a lot of goals that we have for Fantastic. Here's a different view of it. We show a simple 2-node environment where it's interacting with different systems. One item that I'd like to draw your attention to is right over here. Let me get the pen going here and highlight this in this corner. You'll see here that for almost every action within Fantastic, we actually give you the command that is being run from the command line. So much like Nmap can be run entirely from the command line, there's a GUI version of Nmap called ZenMap. And ZenMap gives you that command line entry of what it's actually going to be running. And we've taken that ethos and really ran with it and took it much, much, much further. Before you get into the modularity, Sebastian, I'd like to real quick show how we make it so that you can see those different commands that are being run. So in this instance, let's do this. You can go to the host data commands. You can see the commands that would be run based off of what they're doing. So like if I wanted to run an Nmap scan in the environment, I could just start typing Nmap in the host data commands, window, enable that. And then in a moment, let me refresh this. Now I start seeing different hosts that are in my environment. And I can even interact with these connections. Like I can do things on the connection like put a firewall rule up, or even block that particular application, or kill that process on that machine. Now, obviously you need to be careful with these things, but this is actually a really cool thing that Fantastic does, is it drastically lowers the level of effort to do these things that would be tedious otherwise. So, Sebastian, why don't you walk us through the modularity here for a moment?
All right. So yeah, as I was touching on earlier, the different elements themselves of Fantastic are sort of composed together. Like we have this action, which is like the base unit, and then around those actions we'll have tests. A test will execute an action, and then it'll say, did we find such and such a result in the results from running this action? And if we did, then that's cool, the test passes. If not, sometimes we're including a follow-up action. So it can be like, oh, this thing failed, so click this to run an action that's going to fix this problem on all of the nodes that failed. And then above tests, we have this whole quest system. The daily quest system is still a bit of a work in progress, but the idea is that in like a lot of games, you know, where you'll probably get about 3 quests every day. It'll be like, hey, you should do this, this and this and this to check on your network and analyze problems. And then we have the story quests, which Mick was showing you earlier, which are like a structured progression. So we'd want to start with the most essential items, and then, you know, once you've got those out of the way, it'll direct you to maybe more advanced items. So yeah, that's kind of the way the elements slot together themselves. But on top of that, we're using the npm package manager to allow you to install whichever modules you choose. So you can make modules for Fantastic. You can make them yourself already. We're going to talk about how to do that a little bit later. So all of this data is just JSON files, and what we want. So currently we only have pretty much the default packages that come with Fantastic, but we'd want in the future for you to be able to make your own packages and install those using the npm package manager. And even further into the future, well, we already have this for the story quests, but I'm building an editor where you're going to be able to edit all of the data using a visual interface. And that current story quest that we have, I built that using our editor. And the other thing that's kind of modular is, as you saw during the install, is the authentication modules, which again, people will be able to write their own or choose one of ours, because you have to log into Fantastic using a user account. So, I mean, the default one is just a very simple, sort of database-backed user store, but you can integrate it with Active Directory, or you can write your own module to integrate it with whatever you need. So, yeah, we're aiming to make it as modular as possible. Even a lot of our utility functions and stuff like that are in separate packages on npm. So, if you like something that we're doing in Fantastic, you can require that package using npm and use it for whatever you like without having to necessarily use the whole project. So yeah, that's a bit of information about the kind of the modular aspect of the project.
So somebody sent me a text. They said don't name me, but so I'll respect that. The question was, what's the difference between the story quest and the daily quests? So daily quests, and Sebastian covered it well, the difference between a daily quest is that it's a simple thing that you would run to check something. The story quest is kind of like your main quest arc for like an RPG game. So your story quest can be literally whatever you want. If you're going for, say, you want to have conformance with the CIS critical controls, you can build your own personal story quest and install it, and a bit at a time work on that main quest. And then these daily quests are kind of like little side quests that you can do that will incrementally improve your security posture. So, and they texted back saying thank you. So I guess I covered it.
Yeah, daily is supposed to be like a kind of a routine thing that you might want to run. Because yeah, stories, and then implies it has a progression there.
Yeah. I hope that you're starting to realize that Fantastic is modular and easy. And Sebastian in a bit is going to deep dive on how this works and where we are going to start needing your help. And what we want to really drive home is that this actually isn't that tough to get started. In fact, gosh, probably the first 3 months of development was really coming up with ways to make it be as shallow of an on-ramp as possible. It was kind of frustrating at start how slow we were going, but I think you're going to be surprised at just how easy this is to get going. If you know PowerShell, great, we would love your help. But if you don't know PowerShell, maybe you can code. And if you can't code, as Sebastian mentioned, the entire project is backed by JSON. Sebastian, is there a particular JSON that you think would make a good story for just how easy things are?
All right, so yeah, here's the last boot action. So you can see that's just in the Fantastic default module, and it's in the actions directory. So these JSON scripts are all just placed in a directory depending on what they are. So yeah, you see we've got actions here, we've got the commands, stories, tests. So you just have to put them in a directory and they'll automatically get picked up by Fantastic. So this is the action in which we check when a computer was last booted up. So it's a very simple JSON. You've just got, this is the name here. This is the display name that you'll see on the screen. And then you can add a little description, which it's the same. It's just what people will see on the screen. So here we have this hosts one that's a little less obvious. Now there is some documentation on the GitHub about how to make these, although I think in the future we're going to have to document it a bit more. But considering some of this stuff has only been sort of finalized recently, we haven't gone too deep on the documentation yet. So this local and remote thing. So the local host is the server that Fantastic is actually running on. And remote means you can use this action on any host that we can PowerShell remote into. Because remember, all of this is backed by PowerShell, which is why this is a good job for anyone who's good with PowerShell, because these are quite easy to make. So each action has what's called functions. Now this one just has one called run. This is the default function, because this is a relatively straightforward one. So you see here we have the command, which is just a PowerShell command. So see this command here will give you the last time the computer was booted. And we have the method. We have a couple of different methods of invoking commands. This applies mostly to the remote machines, because there are some commandlets which can use a sim session. So if they take a sim session, there's a sim session method, and invoke will just use the invoke script thing that PowerShell does, where you can just run any command on a remote machine. So JSON true means that it's going to put the PowerShell to JSON thing on the end, and we're going to interpret the result from this as JSON. And then here you can see, so this thing is a little bit more complex to get into, but there is some documentation about how to do this. So each result, it has to have a label. So that's like the kind of title you're going to see on each result. You can see in this case, it's a static one. It always says last boot up time. Now there are ways to get the data dynamically. Like you can see here in the data, this is an array of items that are going to be shown under the label. So here the fact that it says date, this means we're going to interpret this value as a date. Last boot up time just means we're going to find the property on the JSON result that's called last boot up time, and we're going to format that as a date. So yeah, as I say, this is the part where you need to get slightly in depth with the documentation, but I think from looking at a couple of examples, you can probably figure it out as well. Probably our biggest one is the firewall action, because you can see this has the run function, and then the results from that return what are called follow-up actions. So you can see once we've run the command that gets the profiles, we then have follow-ups for each profile that you've got. This can call a function that will enable that profile. So if we look at enable profile, you can see down here, this is the follow-up action. So you can only run this action once you've run the first action, and so on. So even the actions have a sort of progression that will guide you as well, because you'll run the first action and then it will give you the option to perform some actions on those results. So well, maybe that's enough about JSON. I want to show off the editor quickly. So currently the editor is only accessible from the command line, but this is using Node WebKit, which is a pretty neat tool because it allows you to essentially bundle web apps as a standalone Windows or even other platforms, but we're supporting Windows for the moment here. So once this is a bit more finalized, we're going to build this as an exe that you'll be able to use without having to install anything from GitHub. So I can just make a quest here. If I load a module, it's going to go into the file system. So I'm going to load the fantastic default module. And you see here, we've got all of the actions and tests that would be possible to use in a quest. So I can call my quest my cool quest. There we go.
So while Sebastian's working on that, the thing that's cool about this is as he's building these components, what he's going to be doing is stitching together a series of fantastic actions and linking them together. This is using the JS Plum library that I mentioned in passing. And what's cool about this is now he can create any arbitrary set of commands, link them together, and then save it. And what's the coolest bit is it's not editable by anyone else if he marks it as such. So the cool thing here is you can actually give a series of quests that are stepwise and prevent anybody from like subverting them or sidestepping them. So doing like audit compliance type stuff is actually a lot easier now.
So there we go. That's a demo of how easy it is using this JS Plum backed system to string together a few different items. As you say, I can even edit the parameters here. So we can check the last 3-bit form. We can set it to 25 days or 3 days or whatever, and it'll it'll run the test with those particular parameters, and you can see it updates the description in real time and everything. Yeah, to kind of iterate on what Mick was saying there. So there's the editor which you can use to create these, but then they're not editable in the client. We have it in the client. You're just shown like a kind of fixed view of the quest. Because in this editor, I can just kind of drag these around and delete nodes and whatever. JSplum is really cool, by the way. I'd recommend it if anyone wants to build this kind of diagram with web technology. So yeah, I think that's pretty much my part from the demos. So maybe Mick, I can pass you back the screen share now.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So if you can't code, if you can't even do the visual editor, if that seems to be too much for you, don't worry. We have other help that we can use. Send us feedback. I've set up an email distribution that will get sent to Sebastian and I, fantastic at infosecinnovations.com. Would a Discord server make sense? Like, I don't know. You tell us what would work, because we, at this point, we're going to keep on jamming on this tool, but we don't want it to be a tool for us, right? Like, we're on to something. There's something that's just magical about this, and we love playing with it. We're not going to stop. We couldn't stop if we wanted. But it'd be a lot cooler if more people joined in on this party. I hope that this whetted your appetite and that you join in on this kind of fun, you know? And that's what this company, InfoSec Innovation, is all about. Like, innovations is in our name, and we try to live up to it by doing crazy, weird stuff like this. So go out, get fantastic, play around, have fun, join in, let us know what we can do to be better. That's all we had, folks. We got a few extra minutes. If you want to have some Q&A, let us know.
Mick, Sebastian, thank you very much. This is fantastic stuff. I downloaded and played with it when you first brought it up. When we discussed you coming and giving a talk here, this is some high level stuff. I had a couple questions in the chat. For the question is for the GitHub disabled folks, the GitHub curious. Is there a plan to make some kind of installer or some kind of even easier than just building it from GitHub kind of thing when you guys are done, or is that going to be an exercise for the viewer, or what's your thought on that?
Well, we're already using the npm install process, which doesn't require GitHub, but it does require npm. And we are definitely thinking in the future that we could probably ship it as a Windows executable of some sort, because as you've seen, we've already made that editor using Node WebKit, and there's probably some scope for shipping the whole thing as a Windows exe. But as I said, you already don't need GitHub. You just need npm pretty much to install it.
So for the non-developer savvy, npm is Node Package Manager. Node is a JavaScript library that probably much of this is written in, and it allows you to pull down a tremendous amount of stuff and put together a package that can be run from the command line. And you do have to install it first, but there's a ton of good documentation online, but it is a two-step process. You'd have to install npm, which it requires installing Node, but it handles that for you. And then you would run the npm command, which is probably on the fantastic project GitHub. The other question we had is there any protection on the back end to stop someone from using something just like Notepad++ to manually make changes to the config files? Now, to me, I would see that as a feature, but
well, you can.
Is there any confirmation, any defense on the back end for preventing people from breaking things? I assume we're going for. That was Doc 44. If you wanted to toss something else in the chat.
So that's a great question, and I don't think that would be the job of Fantastic. What you're talking about are using file system access to mess around with something. That, to me, feels like something that you would do at the OS layer, by limiting who could see that particular directory.
I mean, the whole thing is basically built out of text files, so
Okay.
you can totally edit it all in Notepad++. That's kind of intentional. As Mick says, you'd want to limit access to the server to people who are allowed to do that.
Well, the general consensus on the Discord channel is really very, very positive, and you guys both know that I like it very much. So really truly appreciate the effort you two have both put in on this. It looks like it's going to turn out to be a tremendous tool.
That is pretty slick. Yeah. There was one more question in the chat. What was the JavaScript library in the UI where you were dragging dots around and making connections?
That's called JS Plum.
JS Plum.
Yeah, we're using the free version. There is also a commercial version that it offers some more data binding functionalities that look maybe cool. I mean, yeah, we managed to do our own thing with the free version, but just to say, there are two versions of JS Plum out there. There's a community and there's the paid version.
Not to throw any shade, but the JS Plum commercial edition was quite expensive. So it didn't make sense for what we were trying to do. I mean, if the price point was a little lower, like that's one thing that's kind of weird in this community. Like the prices can float a great deal. Like some of them are very low, and then others are way more expensive. This one was on the we're gonna think about it level. So we just and Sebastian was able to find everything that we needed with just the free edition. And I got to tell you, it is slick. I really like. I mean, it literally works exactly as he showed. It is just that easy.
I have to say, the developer's been very together with fixing stuff because it's kind of transitioning towards a new version at the moment, and I've been using that kind of development version, and every time I've found any issues with it, I've put in a GitHub issue, and if it was something breaking, the developers fixed it within a couple of days.
That's great.